Ghosts, monsters, the undead, murderers. Horror allows us to explore the darker avenues in life and to confront our greatest fears. Are you brave enough to seek them out? Then follow me into the spectral study. Was created by Allie of Hey Little Thrifter. It originally had 13 questions. However, since the 13th question is requesting that posters tag other channels, and all of the horror booktube channels that I am familiar with have already done this tag, I will be skipping question 13. So, question number 1, how and when did you get into horror? I can remember being about 4 years old and watching the special Disney Halloween on Disney Channel, and being absolutely mesmerized by the Night on Bald Mountain sequence, originally from Fantasia, as well as sequences featuring Disney villains like Maleficent and the Evil Queen. This began my interest in Halloween and other media in subsequent years, such as The Nightmare Before Christmas and the television show Eerie, Indiana, led those around me to realize that I had a general interest in the creepier aspects of life. But it was a short story in the magazine Disney Adventures that made me a genuine horror fan. They had hosted a scary story contest in 1993, and the winning entry was called Bunny Stew. For those who may not have encountered this magazine or this particular story, it tells the tale of a young girl living with her family, including her widower grandfather and her pet rabbit. Her grandfather has some form of mental illness that he's developed since his wife's passing, and while reminiscing about the rabbit stew that he used to prepare with his wife, he begins to fixate on the girl's pet rabbit. One day, the girl comes home from school wearing a bunny costume, and her grandfather is preparing the stew. She opens the pot and sees her pet rabbit inside. The delusional grandfather sees the girl in costume, and the story abruptly ends with the mother returning home to the smell of a delicious stew. If you would like to read this story, I have included a scan that someone uploaded to Tumblr as a link in the episode description below. Question number 2. What was the first horror book that you read? That would be Bunnicula by James and Deborah Howe, which is a children's horror comedy about a vampire rabbit who sucks vegetables dry. I was also a huge fan of the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine, especially Welcome to Horrorland and Stay Out of the Basement, as well as the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark collections by Alvin Schwartz. Question number 3. What horror-related goodness can we expect from your channel? You can take this as an introduction to my channel. This is my first video, and this channel will be focused on horror media of various kinds, including reviews of books, television, and film. I aim to release at least one book review and one film review per month. Some upcoming videos include my review of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark film, as well as the novels The Graveyard Apartment and The Troop. Question number 4. Do you have any favorite themes or subgenres within horror? I am a huge fan of Gothic literature. I love psychological horror and anything that's relatively ambiguous. Also, my favorite trope is the evil priest, which I can blame on reading The Hunchback of Notre Dame when I was 10 years old. Number 5. Name an underrated horror novel or author. Speaking of evil priests, more people need to read The Monk by Matthew Lewis, which is a seminal work of Gothic horror. It's really undeserving of the criticisms that people have heaped upon it due to its graphic violence and sexual violence. So I can understand people having difficulty with the 18th century language, but it's really well worth it if you're a fan of the Gothic subgenre. For underrated authors, I recommend the Austrian writer Gustav Meyrink, who's writing in the 1910s and 1920s. Unfortunately, a lot of his work is relatively unknown and unavailable in the Anglosphere. His most readily available work in the United States is The Golem. Question number 6. Name an overrated horror novel or author. For me, that would have to be H.P. Lovecraft. While I enjoyed the development of cosmic horror that stemmed from his work, I think that too much credit is given to him when there are clear antecedents present in Algernon Blackwood and Lord Dunsany's work, and even Lovecraft himself acknowledged these as influences. I also have a relatively difficult time reconciling the beliefs from the man. As for a specific work, I thought that Stephen King's foray into nonfiction, Danse Macabre, was extremely overrated. It's outdated, very subjective, overly autobiographical in parts, and it's also full of some problematic phrasing, which I won't say on this particular channel since there's some inappropriate language. But if you are looking for some academic criticism of the horror genre or history of such, I recommend S.T. Joshi's 2-volume Unutterable Horror, A History of Supernatural Fiction. Question number 7. Recommend 3 of your favorite horror novels. Well, aside from The Monk, which I already mentioned, I would have to recommend Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, It by Stephen King, and Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. All are examples of works that can be enjoyed at both the surface level or analyzed for greater meaning, and they also feature existential horrors such as fear of the self, the past, and society. Question number 8. Recommend a book for someone who is new to the horror genre. So for those who might not be sure if they enjoy horror or want something tame, I would recommend The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, which is his brilliant middle-grade novel that recasts the Jungle Book with vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. For those looking for something a bit fiercer, I would suggest The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, which not only takes the typical post-apocalyptic zombie story and turns it on its ear, but injects some much-needed heart and empathy into the genre. Question number 9. Are there any book-to-film adaptations that you particularly loved or hated? I have to be honest that I hate the James Whale version of Frankenstein, not because it's a bad film, but because of what it did for the collective pop cultural understanding of that work and that character. I do love the Swedish film adaptation of Let the Right One In, because it is not only a faithful adaptation, but it enables viewers to really feel the permeating ennui of the text through the visual imagery of the film. Question number 10. How do you discover new or new-to-you horror books? As a professional librarian, one of my roles is to purchase materials for all ages, in all genres. So I read Kirkus Reviews, Book Riot, Book Page, the Barnes & Noble blogs, and I also check Goodreads for recommendations. For genre-specific resources, I recommend RA for All Horror, as well as the Horror Writers Association blog. Question number 11. What was the last horror book that you bought? Well, I borrow all of my books from the library, and I typically only purchase books that I plan to reread. Question number 12. What horror book is at the top of your wish list? I facilitate a speculative fiction book club at work, and we are reading Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno-Garcia as our October selection, which I am really looking forward to, both for the plot and in order to share the horror genre with my book club. I'm also excited to read Alraune by Heinz Ewers in the Guy Endor translation, which I just received from an interlibrary loan. What are your answers? Do you have opinions about mine? You can leave your comments below, and stay tuned for my review of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark film adaptation. I'm Sarah Mayacher, librarian and horror enthusiast. Thank you for joining me in the spectral study.